Greetings. I came to this studio to talk about military service from the perspective of an enlisted man, a contractor, as well as a man who's worked in an officer's position in brigade leadership. Like most of the young men of our generation, we think of military service as something we don't understand. Because when you are sitting in the military registration and enlistment office and there's a person sitting right next to you, who says, "Why are you taking me to the army?" "I've been in the army," he says. You look at him and you realize there's a chance that he's going to serve with you. My employer tried to write a letter, saying I don't want to give this employee away, take him back to the reserves. Then, as it turned out during my enlistment, even from talking to the reservists themselves, who were also in the reserves. It's 80 to 90% of the reservists, these are people who have connections with some kind of superiors, well, among the military. In other words, an ordinary, capable worker cannot simply be enlisted in the reserves. This was even very well demonstrated by one comrade, who finished his higher education, got in for a year, but he worked and studied in order to go to work at the nuclear power plant. His office writes a letter to the army, like, "Well, seriously, we have a ready-made specialist, we're gonna start up a power plant, we need someone to work there. Don't take him away." And they take him anyway. In my case, I will say that, yes, there were health problems and tried to, well, to show them, that here, treat me, then take me away. But because I was immediately taken away, all these problems, well, let's just say, nailed it. Military conscription is, shall we say, slavery for food, because you're working, you're always doing something, and all you get fed for it. That's it. I mean, you come here to learn the military, but you're actually a construction worker. We did the usual, how do you say, routine repairs. I mean, we did finishing work, which is plaster, putty, paint on top, linoleum, flooring, I mean, well, standard work. There was a case where some big shot came in and said, "I want this office done in 3 days." And there's nothing there, nothing at all, I mean, it has to be redone. When we worked on renovations, we didn't know our officers' names, we didn't know who our supervisors were, because we came in, we got right into the repairs, roughly speaking, and we didn't see anybody. It got to the point where it took you half a year to find out that this or that captain or major, it turned out to be your boss from your unit and that you had to go to him for any questions. If we're talking about a subject that many people are interested in, which is hazing, it's all, mostly entirely the fault of the officers. When some young officer comes in, they immediately put him on all the baddest of outfits, for the whole weekend, he's in charge from Friday to Saturday, so they shove him in like a plug in any. Something the other one doesn't like. And then these young officers themselves are already waiting when another draft of officers comes in, you know, when they graduate from the military academy, so that, oh, I'll feel better. The enlisted men are watching and they're thinking, they do that, why shouldn't we? Most of the marasmus was the constant builds. On average, 2 hours a day were spent in the lineup, but it used to take up to 4 hours in a whole day. If the winter is cold, you stand there freezing. If summer is hot, it's like, roughly speaking, let's say, boiling hot, you get completely wet. You have to clean the territory, and there are 2 shovels for 20 people. And you go clean the area. We once got to the point of idiocy during a training exercise, when we were already under contract, we had our tent all turned around, we had it completely covered, we had it camouflaged, we hid all the equipment, that's it, we're cool. 3 bosses come over and say, "Man, you are so good." Another boss came and said, "Move the tent." And we ended up moving the tent 10 centimeters. 10 centimeters. And just so you understand, it took about 6 to 7 hours to get the tent back to the same condition that it was originally in. Our tents were adequate, they were warm, the heat was good, the firewood was brought by the crew, so it was okay, too. As for the food, it was alright for the army. But if a civilian comes to eat something different, what's on display at some events, but exactly what they eat in the army, he'll say, "I don't like it. Because, well, it's really not tasty." I mean, yes, you get full of it, but you don't get any pleasure out of it. It's just like fuel so you can keep working. I was an enlisted man plus a contract man for 3 years. And during that time I only fired 9 rounds of live ammunition at the KNB. That's the very first month. And 9 blanks on the so-called funeral team. I don't know about other brigades, but in our brigade, it's a real sad state of affairs. Some machines haven't been driven for 9 years and no one deals with them. They only start working on them when they're in instead of. Like, in the summer, you do the machinery, you start repairing it in the winter. And these boxes, they're cold and the wind's blowing, and the snow, it gets dark very early, you start hanging some lamps, lighting with your phone, which are forbidden, but I thought, well, there's no other way, no one gives out flashlights. We had other tasks in the summer. For the contractors, were to do the kind of construction work that the conscripts were asked to do. During my enlistment, I decided to go for a contract, because at the time there were problems at home. That is, my parents needed some financial help, there were health problems with close relatives, and that's all the money, and you have to come and feed yourself, and also transfer money to you, because when I was in the service, we had the biggest salaries for sergeants, and they, roughly speaking, they came out at about $9 a month. You're always being told that there's no work in civilian jobs, things are bad there, where do you go back to, why do you need it? You'd better go for a contract, you'll get more stable money for it, some benefits, security, you can build yourself up. Yes, speaking of contract servicemen's salaries, I can say that, in principle, everything depends on the position. But if you take an average like that, somehow it's about $400 a month. But when you go into contract service, you're faced with the fact that you're not an enlisted man anymore, you become responsible for some kind of equipment. Accordingly, a lot of money is allocated for repairs of buildings, nothing is allocated for repairs of technicians, but your superiors demand, repair the machinery. That is to say, if you fall for it, you buy fuel there, but the same washer fluid or whatever. That's it, you're on the hook and you're going to work your money into that equipment. The contract service itself initially it didn't seem like such a hard job. You're doing machinery, you're doing some repairs, the paperwork, and everything seemed good at first. Then when you're, shall we say, you get used to it, the officers start shifting some of their responsibilities onto you. First you stay late until 7 o'clock at night, then 8 o'clock, and then it's a matter of luck. In my case, me and my enlisted men, along with the squad, which reported to me, let's just say, in army terms. We also worked from 8 o'clock in the morning and we could work till about 1 o'clock in the morning, till 12 o'clock. To refuse to do any construction work. Somewhere in the beginning you could. But once the bosses who are in charge of repairs, sees the fact that you're constantly being pulled back into subdivisions and you're not doing what they want, they just make an order, and that order requires you to work. If you're trying to do your own engineering, instead of doing construction repairs and someone either gets wind of it, it can get to the point where they can promise you a reprimand. And a reprimand is a loss of bonuses, as I recall, it's the first month right away minus $150 and the next 2 months minus $30, well, every month. It's just that, in fact, the army is a place where they give you an order, and whatever it is, you have to follow it. They give you an order to build. They give you an order to deploy the equipment, deploy it. That is, orders are not negotiable, again, unless they're a felony or something. During my contract service, I was offered a job in brigade headquarters, that is, roughly speaking, the headquarters of the entire brigade. All this said, I was working there unofficially, that is, I was sort of offered, sort of told, that the position will be yours, everything is fine, like, work. There's going to be one big event, and that event will be like your exam. And you're like, well, okay, I'll work. It's cool. But when the bosses would come with an inspection, I'd hide. I had to hide. It got to the point where it was crazy, I'd have to hide in the bathroom so they wouldn't notice. In fact, I originally went there to write off materials. I mean, I'm a construction worker, I'm good at it, it's kind of cool, it's all good. I'll tell you right away that no one stole it, it was not stolen. Everything went into business, people just don't know how to do it. The only thing I can say is, thanks to my supervisor. He was the kind of officer that if they don't know something or don't understand something, They don't pry into your work, they don't pry into your advice. I mean, at first, yes, he would start asking, why are you doing it this way and not that way? I'd say, it's going to be okay. I'll do everything. I started noticing that they stopped getting letters. He didn't have a problem with my work, and so he said, that's it, you just sort of do whatever it is you do. It got to the point where it was absurd that I was dealing with the brigade's problems elsewhere, and the commander calls me up and says, are you coming? I say, what is it? You're needed urgently. And I come in just to call another colonel. And I ask, what was the problem? Why couldn't you call? He says, I don't know what to say. Regarding the officers in their positions. There's a lot of positions in the brigade headquarters that are held by people who are somebody's acquaintances. Because headquarters is a warm place, it's an opportunity to line up faster, and they're getting them there. It's very much about a lot of service women. This is one of the biggest problems. We even discussed it with both contract servicemen and conscripts. This is the misunderstanding of why there are so many women in the army. Yes, this may sound sexist, but in the army, when it's no longer a girl, but a woman who's had a baby, she has to leave steadily there at 5 o'clock, yes, in my opinion, at 5 p.m., she's done. She leaves, no one has the right to detain her. She's got machinery hanging on her. She's got some kind of documentation hanging on her. But she's under that brand somewhere out there, lost, shut down, didn't do it. She's like, 5 hours, that's it, I'm out of here. When you come to the exercises, everyone has the same conditions. We're servicemen first and foremost. But for the women then separately for 2 to 3 days you start to build some beauty, because the superior came and said, make me a beauty. It came to the point of absurdity that they sent conscripts to recruit. At the firing ranges, they sent the conscripts to walk 10 meters, to get them water so they could wash their hair. There was a case where we got a girl, a female soldier, but the commander didn't want her. But his supervisor hinted to him, I'd rather fire you than not hire her. I mean, a soldier, roughly speaking, yes, a girl soldier. But it's easier to fire the commander than not to take the soldier. That's what nepotism in the army can come to, too. Well, I can only say one thing about alcohol in the army. Yes, the military drinks a lot. Just like any other government agency, when there's no cameras and there's a holiday, like Happy Day or New Year. In any government agency, I'm pretty sure people start celebrating in advance. It's in the military, just like everyone else. And right now I'm keeping track of my comrades who stayed in the army, and let's just say, even on the same Instagram, you can see just people taking selfies with a bottle of vodka in the background. I left the army for the reason that. The first reason is that I was tired of hearing that breakfast. They all promised me we'd get you a position, you'll be fine, it's a good position, it's good, but tomorrow, 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 tomorrow. The only good thing are the loyal friends. Another plus of contract service, you get sick, you get paid. You go to a session, you get paid. But that is where the pluses end. The reason I'm in the mask is because there are certain organs that still, in connection with my service in brigade management, may be interested in what I do, how I'm doing, and so just to keep myself safe.